Welcome to Deep Root Connections, a space where earth, animals, nature, and spirit are all alive, intertwined, and communicating. I'm your host, Kara Daniels, and today's episode, I am joined by Allie McMahon, a fellow animal and nature communicator. Allie and I recently connected during a retreat where I was facilitating an introduction to nature communication and land healing. And as soon as we started chatting, we dove headfirst into the rich, layered world of animal communication and quickly realized just how much we have in common with our styles of connection. So, a lot of people think animal communication is just about how an animal feels physically, their likes, their dislikes, or whether the animal is happy, which is absolutely an important part of animal communication. But there's also a whole other dimension that opens up on a soul and more esoteric side. And that's the part where animals might talk about fairies and houseplants and the unseen energies around them, or even their soul evolution. And as a nature communicator, it's quite frequent that houseplants pop in and want to share in the conversation. And Allie, I know you have a few stories that you want to share about that as well. It happens to me all the time. And so this is a space Allie and I are going to be exploring together today, where it's maybe not so quote unquote normal animal communication. We are going to bring forward a little bit more of the mystical side. So, Allie, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited you are here.
Me too. Thank you for having me. This is going to be such a fun chat. This is honestly my favorite part of the animal communication sphere
Yep,
is where they can take us that we don't expect. And it's
exactly.
my favorite thing to be able to bring through in sessions whenever people are open to talking about that side of things is animals going into, yeah, their soul plans, their lessons that they're bringing in for their people, especially if their people are really open to it. They might even talk about shared guides that they're aware of and be like, hey, I want to bring them in because we both have something that we want you to know today. Um, and ever since meeting you, I've gotten to expand into more of what they're picking up on in their environment in terms of like nature beings and other things that might be popping into the house that were coming into sessions before, but now that like I've gotten some extra information from you and we've dove into that rabbit hole a bit more, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that is.
Oh, the rabbit holes of the fairylands. That
Mhm.
is so funny. When I first started animal communication, it was maybe 6 months in my professional practice where I was like, oh my gosh, we're talking about fairies? What? None of my mentors ever mentioned that fairies or other beings could pop in. So for me, I was totally taken aback and I doubted my skills until I did some more research outside of animal communication. But I love bringing these concepts forward to help normalize those kinds of
Mhm.
connections. So, question for you, how did you get started in the world of animal communication?
Yeah, so I've been in it for about 2.5 years now, and I started with a simple course. I say simple, it was a life-changing course through a mutual friend of ours, Pet Talk with Alex, it's her handle. So Alex Anderson was my initial teacher in the world of animal communication, and I just took her intro course. Um, 7 months later, I was uh, opening my own little professional operation and taking paid clients and getting into more of the business sides of things after really deep diving for the first like 6 or 7 months. Because I just got absolutely hooked as soon as I got into it, as soon as I realized, oh my God, I can actually do this. Because I was one of those people who was like, I believe this is a thing. I don't know if I can actually do it. And then I got enough proof and like proof of concept that I was actually doing it. And just from then on, I was completely hooked. And it kind of took over my life a little bit in the best possible way and just reshaped how I see and interact with reality in a way that looking back, I always know that my younger self was actually doing this, and I just got to go back and do a lot of even inner child healing because of it. Um, because of just going back and being like, oh, that experience that I had that I talked myself out of, that was legitimate. That little Allie actually knew what she was doing. So there was a really beautiful for so many reasons, in so many ways, there were really beautiful healing opportunities along the way. And that's, I think, a gift of this work that I also want to get that message out there to as many people as possible that when we get into this stuff, it's just the biggest invitation for self-healing in the world. And that's one of the reasons, because looking back, I can pinpoint a few moments pretty early on that I was doing the skill and had talked myself out of it. I think my biggest, loudest, most undeniable experience happened when I was 9 years old. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to do with that. No one's here to, make sense of that for me. So I'm just gonna like stuff it in a corner and not think about it too much anymore. Um, and when I when I kind of got out there and tried to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I really wanted to work with animals, but none of the avenues really felt right. Like training was something that I was absolutely obsessed with for the longest time, but actually working as a trainer didn't really feel that aligned. I wanted to be a vet when I was 5 years old. Up until I like graduated high school, I was like one of those people who was like, "Oh, I'm going to work with animals, so I have to be a vet," and then that didn't feel right. Um, so I couldn't really figure out how to fit into my niche there. So instead, I went into working with plants, and I became a professional landscaper for about 13 years. Did that in a variety of ways. Worked on flower farms, did all kinds of things for about 13 years in the plant world instead, and then got started with that course with Alex and dove into animal communication, let that be my life for a while. And now, integrating your work into that, I'm like bringing back in the plant friends and bringing back in some of the nature beings and some of these other contexts. So it feels like a more holistic view of all of the things that have always drawn my interest.
It makes me want to cry. There's so many things that align and are completely similar with my story too. I might have to ask if you're comfortable sharing, what happened when you were 9, where you were like, this happened, but I don't know what to do with it.
So it's a wacky story. We want to talk about reincarnation. Let's just go all the way in there. My
Oh,
current
let's do it.
my current dog, who was the first dog that I was able to adopt as an adult. She was also my first cat as a child, and she is such a powerhouse and such a heavy hitter guide type of being. I feel like she's one of those animals I could write a book about. But when she was a cat, I got her when I was 9 years old. Um, and I remember this might have happened when I was 10. I'm trying to think about the actual timeline here. Got her when I was 9 years old. So when I was 10, I was out at like a county fair concert with my mom. And I was so attached to this little kitten. She was my kitten. It was just like the first, animal that I got to have that was just like, oh my goodness, she's mine. And like, not just like a family pet. Um, and I was so attached to this little kitten. And I was out at this county fair concert with my mom having a great time. Like, I don't remember who the artist was, but I remember being really excited to see them. And halfway through, I just start like sobbing. It's kind of an intense story, but it's okay. I'm gonna spoiler alert. It has a happy ending. Everything's okay. Um, I just got the most intense anxiety in my chest. I was just like shaking. I was like a little on like the verge of a little mini, panic moment out in public. And I'm just like, I don't know why I'm crying. I feel like I'm really happy to be here. I'm really enjoying this concert, but I just got this feeling that something's wrong with this cat. Like something's wrong. Her name was Misty at the time. So it's like something's wrong with Misty. Like I don't know what it is, but she's not okay. Um, like all that fear, I was just like, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. Um, and when I was a kid, we had cats that were like indoor, outdoor. So they would be outside, but we always called them inside at night. That was the deal. Like our cats would respond to their names and we could just like go outside and be like, hey, time to come in. It's like approaching dark. You have to come inside. That's the deal. And we get home a little bit later than usual. And, the whole ride home, my mom's like, I'm sure everything's fine. Like, I'm sure she's good. Everything's normal. Um, and I got home and my dad was just like, yeah, Misty hasn't come in yet. Like, she's gone. I go into like full on tiny child panic mode and I'm like, get my flashlight. I'm like suiting up and I'm like going into the woods to find my cat. Um, and about, 20, 30 minutes later, she comes down from a tree, like visibly panting, really stressed. Like it seemed like something had tried to get her. She came in and she was like panting, she like got the big eyes, but she like as soon as I got near her, she ran right over, and like basically jumped up in my arms and that was that. And she was all good, but it was one of those moments where like neither of my parents could explain why, 20 minutes away, I had a freak out panic moment about the fact, which I would have had I been home, I would have been, very concerned that she hadn't come in by that time of night. I would have been like, that's weird. That's uncharacteristic. She's always really reliable. So that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, no other explanation for why in my body I felt the panic that I believe to this day that she was feeling at that moment when like something almost, tried to get her, tried to prevent her from coming back home or from coming inside. And and yeah, she that was the one and only time I ever saw her looking that visibly stressed. So it was one of those things that felt really undeniable, but we were kind of like, okay, uh, don't know what to do about that. There were no, teachers or anything like that, other resources around that could really make sense of that experience. So it was one of those things that I was just like, okay, that was a fluke.
That's so interesting. And it makes so much sense. As kids, we're always just so connected to our animals. I too had very similar experiences where it's like, I don't feel very comfortable. And then something happened. I was like, ah. But so it sounds to me like you felt comfortable enough to talk to your parents about this and at least have somebody to share with, even though that they didn't know how to help necessarily.
It was one of those things I couldn't really hide because I was freaking out, honestly. I was just like, something's terribly wrong.
Mm.
So I was an easy crier as a kid, and they were just like, I'm sure everything's okay. And then I get home and I'm like, everything is not okay. She's not back yet.
Not okay. I was an easy crier too. I still am actually. It's okay to cry, folks. It's all good. Okay, so that happened, and you keep mentioning the woods. And if I remember, you had a nice little ecosystem to play in. Out of curiosity, since you were so connected to your kitty already, did you feel connected to nature at that time too, or maybe even those within the unseen realms?
Yes. So definitely the plants themselves. At that point, I was one of those kids who was friends with trees. Like I still have specific trees that I'm like, okay, you're a buddy. Like I like to go back and visit them telepathically or in person. Um, that are still just like really close friends. And there are certain ones that would just stick out that I would just know that it was a good being to spend a lot of time with that I would just be drawn to and kind of couldn't pull myself away from certain spots, certain beings. So that was one thing that I think you also helped me make a lot of sense of is certain locations too. It wasn't just one tree, it was just the area that was holding this kind of specific energy. It'd be like a little gully beneath a tree where there were some ferns and it was just like this little collective energy spot where I was like, this feels like home. This feels like a safe little like cozy spot. And I would just make these little areas in the woods that I would have to go kind of go in and check in on. But each one holding its own specific energy, its own specific frequency was also just um, it was almost like being able to kind of tap into the land in like little microbursts in that way, even as a kid. And then in terms of in terms of seeing some of the unseen beings, I have to go pretty far back for that one before I talk myself out of that. But um, I definitely have some memories of, 3-year-old, 5-year-old me seeing little things here and there and just, again, kind of talking myself out of it. Um, but those would be things that even now I don't know that I could put a name to. It's not like, oh yeah, I saw a fairy for sure. That's exactly what happened. But um, it's really easy for a young girl to talk herself out of seeing unicorns because they're just so in the space of like young girl, and it was in the early 90s. Unicorns were everywhere. It was like Lisa Frank era. So I was just like, oh no, they're just in my mind. But looking back, I'm kind of like, okay, some of those were real. Like at least a couple of those were real sightings where it was sort of like the veil didn't exist for a moment.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Did you watch My Little Pony?
I kind of grew up without a lot of TV, so I have a few memories of getting to see that at friends' houses.
That's so funny. That was like my one show. I was like, My Little Pony, because they get to fly, and this is so real. I too lived in that
So
world. I grew up in a more urban environment. My mom had this beautiful garden. She's such a great gardener. And so I would just like wander the flowers and eat their petals, thinking that was normal, little
yep,
kid things. And
absolutely.
I always thought the bumblebees were like not bumblebees. So very similar experiences where it's like, I think I think I see things, but I don't really know. And I live in my own little world. So sure, and then it's like you grow up and you're like, oh no, I'm the weird one. I can't do that anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, I have
Oh,
no
that was,
more
yeah.
feelings about dragonflies. Like they're not
Hmm.
dragonflies.
So I'm curious now. And I do feel like that animal communicators that have a tendency to quickly start hearing more about those within the unseen realms have a natural connection to nature. At least this is my observation with my students. I could be totally way off base here, but that's just from what I've seen. Nature people who open up to animal communication almost always find their way back to
Yeah.
nature. And so that's why I love your story so much is a nature person. You did landscaping. That is amazing. I did too for a really long time. The plants called me back, and then the animals called me in. And then it was like, how do we merge the two together? And slowly the animals would start bringing in the fairies or these other different kinds of energies. And I was like, this is amazing. We're going there. Because at that point, the discernment was there and the
Exactly.
trusting our abilities. So I'm curious, what kind of stories do you have with the animals where you're like, hold on, what are we talking about now? And then what now? Like, tell me all about that, like the fairies and the other beings that the animals are bringing up.
I love that you keep kind of hitting on the fairies because fairies are like the most common thing that come up for me in sessions. Um, and I couldn't agree more that like eventually the things just call you back when it's time. And I absolutely had to go and build confidence in the skill with pets, with people who could confirm all the information that I was getting. Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily trust it. So I definitely needed to go about it in that order. But earlier on, one of my earliest clients had a dog who talked to me about this poor plant that was like half dead in the corner, but the owner just couldn't get rid of it. She was just like, I know that plant, she's like, I think it's properly dead at this point, but the dog loved it. This dog in particular was just like obsessed with this little plant. And when we were talking about it, she brought up the idea of having these little, like friends, little spirit friends in the plant. And they were tiny little lights. They were just tiny little bright lights that they presented as this time. And this was before me taking the idea of like fairies seriously really entered the chat. So that's how my mind could process it, was just like these little tiny lights that were hanging out in this plant. I'm really attracted to this plant. And the dog was just such a fan. And the client on the other end, bless her heart, she was just like, I can't get rid of this like basically dead plant. Just because I know how much my dog loves it. And I've never understood why. And I'm just like, yeah, she's showing me that there's like little lights that she likes to play with and like interact with in the plant. So fast forward to one of my absolute favorite stories because it wasn't what I was expecting. Um, Actually, after the retreat that I went to with you, where I had a string of cats talking to me about house fairies. And this one was just one of the funniest interactions that I've gotten to have about it because I had one cat in particular who was not having it with house fairies. Every other one that I've talked to, they're kind of like really into it. They really enjoy having them around. It makes the house feel alive and kind of fun. I even had a cat who has an inexhaustible play drive and whose brother is like, I don't want to play with her because if I give her an inch, she'll take a mile and she won't leave me alone. We actually like called in some fairies for her to play with in that case, and she loved that idea. But this other cat in particular was just like, there are aimless fairies wandering around here with nothing to do, and they bug me. Like, what are they like? They don't have a job, they don't have a goal. And like, this cat was not amused by the fact that there were little fairies hanging out in the house with nothing specific to do. He was like, it's okay if they have a job, but if they're just wandering around, I'm not having it. And so we had to give them something to do. So I kind of like called in the fairies and negotiated a little bit. And they were like, we need plants. We would like congregate around some plants. We would congregate around. Um, they showed me like little living stones is the way that I think they said it, of like living stones where it's either a crystal or a stone that has the right kind of um, playful attitude that they wanted to have in the house. So like specific stones, not just anything. Um, kind of grouped together in certain spots in the house. They even gave me like instructions for these like macrame dream catchers that they would spend a lot of time in. And the cat was like, okay, cool. If they have their spaces and if they're contributing, like if they're pulling their weight in the space, then they can stay and I won't mind. But otherwise, he was kind of like chasing them around and trying to like shoo them away. He didn't trust the aimless fairies.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I have had so many sessions with cats and fairies, and it's like a love or hate situation. They're like, "Oh, I love the fairies," or they're like, "Get them out of my space." It's like there's no in between. It's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, this
I
cat
had a
just had some
question.
boundaries. He had some boundaries about the
Boundaries. Oh
fairies.
my
Yeah.
gosh. Yes. There have been a few times where the fairies are causing a little bit of mischief and they're just being playful. And the animals are like, no, we need you to get out of the house. Like, go live in that tree over there. We can play out there, but the house is mine. And so we actually have had to set up boundaries specifically. And one of the dogs that I was working with, he was like, they like to brush my hair and twirl, but then they wake me up and I just don't really like them. I was
Mhm.
like, okay. So we had to basically have a group meeting with the dog and the fairies, like, okay, can we all agree to these terms and conditions? And everyone was like, yeah. And then everything was fine afterwards. But I think that even some behavioral issues I've seen are a direct result of not necessarily the fairies, but other kinds of beings that are just hanging around. Like I had this dog one time, and I'm curious about some of your more uh esoteric type of sessions, but I had this dog one time. They're like, she just keeps barking at the corner and there's nothing there. What is happening? I was like, oh yeah, you have an elemental that's like totally displaced and he has no idea where to go. And so he's trying to hide in this corner and not be seen. This dog can see it. And so we removed our this elemental friend, sent him to a place that was more appropriate, and the dog stopped barking at the corner immediately. It's like these little things that you wouldn't even think of that might
Mm-hmm.
even be a behavioral concern, or just like, oh no, you just have something happening on the unseen realm space, and it's an easy fix. So, what
You
is your
know,
most bizarre conversation where you're just like, what now?
the one that's coming to mind most recently was less fun than the house fairies, for sure. Was a dog who just did not want to go on walks in his own space anymore. Would not get in the car, wouldn't, it was really sudden. It was really, really sudden change. It was just like all of a sudden, switch flipped, and for like 2 weeks, he wouldn't get in the car, didn't want to go on walks in his own neighborhood. Um, So I tuned in, and this is one of those moments when I did call in our friend Emily for a little bit of backup just to get a second set of eyes on things. Because even when you're in the space with animals, sometimes if they just hit you with a wall of fear, you're just getting that initial wall of fear and not a whole lot of context otherwise. So I this is one of those moments when I called in a little bit of backup to just be like, I'm getting this like just wall of fear when I'm asking about why he doesn't want to go on walks anymore. It's something that he used to absolutely love, and just all of a sudden he doesn't want to do it anymore. And the 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 representation that he gave me was kind of just this cloud that felt like fear. It was like anytime he got near it, it was just like he was really spooked. And then when I got my report back from my buddy, who was my second set of eyes, my go-to, just like, yeah, I'm getting the idea of like an entity here. And I was like, okay, there we go. We have something to work with. Um, and once I was able to be like, okay, bud, went back to the dog and I was like, can you confirm that this is what you're seeing? And then he started to share details with me about what it was. And it was just kind of one of those errant energies that they feel a little bit like they cause some havoc just because they kind of feed on some of those yuckier emotions. And this dog had spotted it. He was kind of like, okay, I can cause a little bit of disruption with this dog because he's sensitive enough to notice me. And it was kind of just like feeding on that fear feeling that it was creating. Um, and that ended up being one of the most simple fixes, though, because basically we escorted that being out of that specific space. It was pretty much posted up and getting into some of the land communication topics. We brought in the land there and being like, why is it stuck in this one spot? And there was something that was kind of like holding it to that spot. So we kind of dove in and negotiated with it to see it away and kind of clean up that one spot that it was attached to and attracted to. Um, Cleared the space basically, and then it was like the next day like that. I think it was the same day that we did that the dog was able to like hop back up in the car and was able to go on adventures again, and just needed to like slowly build up their tolerance to walking around the drive, like around the neighborhood after that. But it was a pretty immediate response of like, oh, okay, he's happy to go in the car again, because what he showed me was the thing like kind of coming around the other side of the car and like basically giving him a jump scare one day that he tried to get into the car, and then he was like, nope, nope, never again, not doing that. um, so he, as soon as we cleared that thing, he was like, okay, cool, we can get in the car again, we can go on adventures. And it was just like an immediate, that day, the next day, like the owner kept sending these really incredibly heartwarming pictures that almost make me want to cry of him just being able to like go enjoy the spots that he used to be able to enjoy, because at least they could drive him places then, and he had to like build up a little confidence again. Again, they kind of, animals I feel like just need that proof of concept, like it's really gone, right? Like, are we sure? Like, I need to feel that it's actually gone, and isn't going to surprise me somewhere else. But that was a really quick change, just from like one thing that, because animals are so sensitive to this stuff and they can just pick up on this stuff so much easier than we can most of the time, that we could just handle that one thing for him, and it was just like a night and day difference.
Oh, that's so interesting. I had a very similar situation with one of my clients. She was like, my dog just keeps barking out the window and refuses to go into the front yard. And she's like, I don't know why. And I was like, okay, well, let's just see what's going on. I was like, oh, there is some sticky stuff over there. This dog was like, yeah, there's like this weird looking person walking around, but it doesn't look like a person. I'm like, okay, hold on, let me just go check it out. And it was actually a discarnate soul who was just trying to find a way to cross over.
Yeah.
And he felt the energy of the house and was like, this person is like a beacon. So I'm going to hang out here until like I can get help. And so I was like, oh, we just crossed this person over and it was fine. And then like the clouds lifted and then the dog was like, oh, I can go outside and go pee now, finally.
Mhm.
It was like a really easy fix. It's just like being able to see these different types of energies, whether you're working with the animals or not. It's like there's so many things within the unseen realms that are there that most often just need help.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love your analogy there of like the clouds lifting, because that is so often how it presents for me, is just this like kind of dark cloud just sort of hanging out. It's not like, not always trying to cause trouble. I think that example with that dog, that one was a little more intentional on the behalf of the being, but 99.9% of the time, it just feels like this kind of like lost thing that needs some guidance, needs a little assistance.
Yeah, that's what I find a lot is like lost elemental beings or nature spirits or something, and they're just like, I don't know where to go. I don't even know how I got here. Just somebody help me relocate. It's like,
I don't
okay,
know
I
where to
got you,
be.
buddy.
Yeah.
I got you, buddy. Okay, so I want to go back into the landscaping part of your life, and animal communication and nature communication. As you said, you're kind of bringing them all together into one. Tell me a little bit more about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, what that looks like for me, honestly, is at this point, I am still, firmly just offering animal communication sessions right now, but I'm trying to like bring in a few more plant communication sessions, a few more land-centric sessions where we kind of navigate into the dynamics on the land and how everything's interacting, to see if we can kind of smooth over some of those things that are like a little more of a quick fix of just like, okay, we just need to make a couple tweaks over here, so that everything's interacting a little more harmoniously. Um, the one of my first um, forays into offering just like plant communication session only had to do with navigating a cat who was chewing on this jasmine shrub, um, and just would of course make himself sick by chewing on the leaves, and like they had to be kept in separate rooms and things like that. um, and the plant was just like, I really don't want to make him sick, but he's just so attracted to my energy, he can't help himself. And what ended up happening was this plant defoliated. She kind of needed a really hard reset, little root prune. She was really root bound. She needed like a hard reset. So even without leaves, this client was just like sent an email update a little bit later after the plant was like fully defoliated and like had been tended to and given the royal treatment to see if she could come back to life because she'd been under somebody else's care for a while and had struggled a bit there in that other environment. And this this cat was still chewing on just her sticks. And he'd never like chewed on the sticks before. He was always like a leaf muncher. But now that she had no leaves, he was like given access to her for just a moment. And he was like, okay, I'm going to go nibble on the sticks because he just absolutely loved the energy of this shrub so much. And it also, that was one of those cases where we brought in um, the client's father, who like they kind of shared some of these plants together, that he came in and the cat was also bringing attention to that. So it was kind of like a little triangle of connection between the plant, the cat, and her late father as well. So bridging some of those worlds through plants, through animals, through like our connections, that whatever needs to come through for us, honestly, sometimes these plant and animal connections are such a bridge to those things that it opens up the space and in a way where I feel like people's hearts are already very open because we're talking to their plants or their animals or something that they already love. So it's even easier to kind of get some of those bigger messages across as well. Um, and then on the landscaping side of things, yeah, I've got one example just in my personal life of a tree needing to be taken down. And I can't even begin to describe how much better I feel about having to lose this tree, which I loved, um, just because I was able to give it a heads up and just like a simple heads up and negotiation about like, what do you need? And that turned into a really beautiful experience of it was sort of out of my control that this tree was being taken down, but I had some notice. So I tapped into the tree and was like, okay, this is what the plan is. What can I help you with before you get cut down? And the tree was like, okay, I am the guardian tree of this forest, of this orchard. It was an apple tree. Um, so he's like, if I'm going to be taken down, we need to pick a new guardian for the orchard. And two trees actually needed to come up, like one on either side of the orchard, came up and volunteered to be the new guardians. They had to like share the role because of how much this one tree was doing. They were like, I don't want to take on the whole thing, but the two of us together can handle what this one tree was doing. And then the tree said it needed 3 days to pull its energy back down into its roots, which thankfully it had 7 days. So it had plenty of time. And I can still go out there and like feel the energy of the tree in that root system. He said that he wanted to stick around and like coach the two new guardian trees for this whole growing season. So its energy is still pulled into its root system and is being like used as a bit of a network as a teacher under under the soil for the two new guardian trees of the orchard. And he's got an escape plan, so I'm checking in with him in the fall and making sure that everything's going to be in good working order. But we already created like an energy line between where his energy is in the earth around his root system to the nearby forest, to like one tree in particular who's going to help him kind of see his way out of the space when it's time. But he wanted to stay for the other trees and hold his energy there for the other trees while they adjust for at least this growing season until the fall. And he was just like, well, this is appropriate. This is what will make it the least traumatic experience for all of them. He wasn't really worried about himself. Um, and the difference that I can feel from the landscaping background, this is one of those things where I'm like, I was getting a lot more information than I thought I was back when I was working. Because sometimes when things like that happens, it feels traumatic to the space. It feels like we just did some harm, and I know that that's also a natural part of life out in the woods sometimes is this disruption and then a settling and a rebuilding. Um, and they have their ways of coping with that, but sometimes it's needlessly disruptive and needlessly damaging to the beings that are there. And just being able to give them a simple heads up that space still feels so whole and intact because they had a way to plan ahead of time and manage what they needed to do. So just being able to bring that into the conversation is such a joy because I do have a lot of memories of sometimes things needing to be done and it just feels rough. But being able to give plants a heads up makes such a world of difference because the energy out there still feels amazing. It feels really whole and calm. And sometimes when we disrupt things just as humans, because we're like, oh, I need to take that tree down for whatever human reason that doesn't always even make sense for the ecosystem. We're not always seeing all the threads that are relying on that tree, or the ways that that tree is, or any other plant really, how those plants are impacting the surrounding community of plants, um, can feel really jarring. So being able to smooth that over is a huge, huge driving force for me at this point.
Yes, I feel that so much. What is so interesting about all of that is where do I want to start now that we're at the tree topic? Like this is my space.
Yeah.
So many people ask me all the time, it's like, well, we have to take a tree down. What is the best practice? And I'm always like, just let them know. Like, you literally do not have to be a quote unquote formal communicator to go out and let your trees know what's happening. Hopefully, a 3 day minimum. It's interesting you said 3 days. That's what the trees are always telling me too, is like a minimum of 3 days because that's how long it takes for them to like renegotiate their energy with thought and care and also work with the others in the ecosystem, whether that be other trees, plants, fairies, whoever. It's like they can make plans of departure, if you will, before the tree's actually taken down. And what I always tell people is like just go send love to them, let them know if you can give them a day count like by moon cycles, like moon 1, moon 2, moon 3, like that's how plants count. It's not like 3 days. Anyway, and they can make plans accordingly and it really does help with the energy impact or the overlay that can possibly be left over when done with more disrespect, if you will, or without care. So it's really not hard to do. Just let them know, give them a few days, and you're good. And it makes such a difference. And it's just so respectful. Even pruning, and I'm
Mhm.
sure you did this just naturally as a landscaper. It's like, oh, I'm gonna prune you now. Like, are we good? And then like I'm gonna prune here, here, here. And
Mhm.
even if you're unconsciously just connecting in with a plant, they too are like pulling their energy back. Like, okay, go ahead now. That's what trees and
Uh-huh.
plants always do for me. It's just like that uh interconnection of energy and connection, whether you're meaning to or not, is there if you truly care. And it's not just like, I'm just here to shave this bush and then move on, you know,
Yeah. Yep.
definitely different of energetic exchanges there.
Hugely different. Hugely different. Um, Two things come up there. One is just the simple difference that acknowledging them as their own beings makes. Like that alone, I feel like just smooths things over so much. Just recognizing that they're not just objects and that they're alive and that they have a sentience of their own, even if, from our human lens, it's not always as easy for people to see the sentience of the plants versus sentience of the animals. Um, Even just, it's such a relief how I felt about that growing up of people not seeing animals as like sentient beings sometimes and just seeing them as kind of like objects or tools to, you know, achieve a goal. Um, I feel like that's changed a lot, and now I'm ready to see the change with the plants. I'm ready to see people interacting with them as being their own beings a little bit more instead of just like objects. So that shift alone, I feel like, is so huge, and just meeting them with that energy, I think, makes such a big difference because it's like the difference of having a tough conversation with respect versus doing it in a way that feels kind of careless and just like you're just, you know, crashing through an experience. And it's on their end, I feel like more of a fumbling in the dark experience rather than being met and and guided through something. And on the pruning side of things, I still think that shrubs taught me how to prune them. Like I still think I did that 100% intuitively. I had like those few guidelines that everybody gets that guided me through, but ultimately I think that I was unconsciously connecting to all of those shrubs and just like pruning purely intuitively because I have no thoughts in my head when I prune. I'm just kind of like letting my hands go and just kind of like noticing certain spots. I'm like, okay, okay, okay. It's like being invited to trim certain spots rather than me going in with my human intellectual overlay of, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. It always felt more like I'm just gonna check in with this plant and let it guide me however it needs to.
Yeah, I love that. I feel the same way. I find that the more I connect in with my plants specifically, it's like, oh, I'm looking for like some kind of tea today. Who wants to be in my tea? And sometimes I like literally feel my plants going, me, me, me. pick me. And then others are
Yeah.
like, don't look at me. I'm not interested. I'm like, okay, cool. I gotcha. I'll just go and pick the plants that want to be in whatever it is that I'm doing that day. And it's like they tell me which leaves to pull or prune off and how
Yeah.
to do it and then how to steep them appropriately. Like some plants get a little snarky and they're very particular. They're like the temperature needs to be here. I need to be in. I'll let you know when I need to be taken out. And then this is when you drink me. I'm like, okay, you guys. Like, I just wanted some tea.
I think there's a really interesting fine line to walk too between being able to get all this information and resisting the urge within yourself to have to make everything perfect all the time. Like that perfectionist streak exists in my brain for sure. And I'm just like, wait, no, like we're all just going to do our best. If we can get all this information from all these sources, sometimes it does feel a little bit overwhelming to make everybody happy. But we kind of set the intention of what we're able to do and what we're actually available for. And it feels a lot better to be able to get so much information and so much input from all these different sources. I love what you said about the tea, though. My herbalist background is also, I don't think I mentioned that piece that I studied herbalism pretty intensively for about 4 years, worked in an apothecary for a couple of years, and got really into plant communication without realizing that I was doing that on that side of things as well. Um, so I've just been spiraling this space for a long time. But with herbs in particular, one of my favorite things to do is kind of just set the intention of like I'm going to go out. Whoever wants, like you said, whoever wants to be in this today. Sometimes I'll set that intention with my body though, of like what do you need, and kind of open this line of communication of just like without my conscious mind even being involved, just like body, what do you need, and seeing that almost that energy cord from my body itself just going out to the landscape and being like we can collaborate, like what's actually who's available, who wants to volunteer, and body guide the process of like what do I actually need today.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I didn't know that you studied that. Is like a oh, that's one of the avenues I'm dying to learn more about. But I'm like, I just don't have the time to do it. But that's really cool that you have that in your background as well.
Mhm.
Do you ever, oh, I don't know timeline wise if this would fit, like when you used to be landscaping, you hadn't quite opened up your animal communication skills yet. Is that right?
Not consciously, no.
Okay, so looking now forward into today's time, are you gardening? Do you have a garden? Do you?
I have a minimal garden. Where I am right now, I am absolutely surrounded by plants and some really beautiful gardens in my space. I have a very minimal veggie garden at the moment. Um,
Oh, I love
it's
that. Hey,
yeah,
even one plant makes a difference, you know?
absolutely. And I can't live without houseplants. I have a pretty close connection with a lot of these houseplants. Um, so they're in my space. Things really just don't feel right unless I have plants in my space. I'm kind of one of those people who like, I've lived in cities. I lived in New York for a few years, and there's so much nature there that you can find too. Like I was able to fine tune that connection out there. I really love that experience specifically for helping me find nature no matter where I am. But I'm still one of those people who's like best off in the country and surrounded by as many plants as possible. However, managing plants and gardens the way that I want to is pretty energy intensive, and it's one of those things that I haven't really been able to do the way that I want to do. I'm also kind of in a little bit of a transient phase of life, so I'm borrowing the plants of friends and family and loved ones right now, to kind of get that fix. But one thing that I have done with the little veggie patch that I've got going right now is basically focusing a little bit more on bridging the worlds and calling in more of the elemental beings to to the space. Um, a lot of the fairies, and there's some. Um, they're kind of connecting in right now, which is why I'm smiling. I want to call them elves, but they're also just like we're forest creatures. They're kind of correcting me a little bit, but those two types of beings in particular have been pretty involved with that veggie garden so far, and it's so funny. Out of all the years, this is the year where like absolutely everything that was direct seeded came up, um, like crazy germination rates, which was really noteworthy. I think there was just one row of basil that didn't come up that needed to be replanted, but other than that, like huge germination rates this year. So it's always nice to kind of see these little proofs of concept in that way too.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Actually, it's funny you're bringing in all of the other beings because I was going to ask you about wildlife. Like, do you talk to the
Mhm.
bumblebees or anybody that's like kind of milling about your garden to see what they have to say about it? But it makes so much sense that the other beings would be invited in and also help. I find like they literally go hand in hand. Like, although some of the bees have their strong opinions as well, kind of like my tea leaves, the bumblebees are like, this is not a wildflower, and I can clearly taste and feel the difference. I'm like, I know,
Uh-huh.
but it was pretty.
Uh-huh.
So I have this huge wildflower garden, and they always let me know. Like the snapdragons I buy, they're like, these are not native. I'm like, I know, but they're pretty. And then you have like a whole garden dedicated to you. Go over there. But
Mhm.
it's so much fun to kind of get their perspectives and what they need, their
Yeah,
likes and their dislikes, and just like having that conversation open.
I love that so much. Absolutely love that so much because of all the things, of course, the bees are going to come in hot and be like, well, you can hear us and we need people to hear this. Please, please plant native things. Um, I definitely walk that line though, as a human, where I'm just like, okay, you have a lot of things over here. I just want this one flower, please.
And it's so pretty, it
So we
makes me
strike a balance.
happy.
We strike a balance, but yes, planting more things that they can actually properly enjoy that actually genuinely feeds them the way that they want to be fed is it's just so crucial. Try not to get on the bee tangent too much, but oh my bumblebees, I do feel like are very chatty out of all the bees. I feel like they're the ones who like to pop in, whereas some of the other bees are a little more like focused and they're just like getting down to business and they kind of like, okay, cool, you're here, thank you. Don't really have time. But the bumblebees, man, I feel like they really like to get attention and they like to chat.
They
Like bumblebees.
do. And they like to dance. I don't know if you've ever had this where like you're admiring one of the bumblebees and they like start shaking their little butt and they're like, see this? We have little dance parties sometimes. It's ridiculous.
That's amazing. I can very clearly see you just dancing with your bumblebees out in the garden.
Yeah, my son the other day was like, I don't hold back. It is what it is, right? And he was looking out the window and he was yelling to my husband. He's like, Mom's dancing again. She's being so weird. It's like, I know. You'll get this one day.
When a bumblebee wants to dance, I mean, who am I to say no? You know,
Hey, it's a little
who
party up in
gets
here.
who gets to say yes to that invitation? Very few people get to say yes to the bumblebee invitation. So
No, I
take
want
it.
everybody to have that opportunity.
Mhm. There's
Okay, here's a question for you.
yeah.
Do you find a difference, like based on your background and where you started with formal animal communication? Did you find or have you found a difference in maybe not how the information comes in because telepathic communication and energy exchange is universal, but have you found a difference between like animals, nature beings, and plants? And if so, what have you found?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just got a little bit of a lesson on this recently from the spirit of the land that I'm on in terms of how the essentially like the soul contracts basically of like domestic animals versus wild animals versus plants are very different across the board and account for some of the different ways in which they offer up their communication and that they want to agree to communicate with us. Even if we're just the most open-hearted, like, I just want to love you, like, please talk to me kinds of people, they've just got different agreements. They didn't always agree to be as close to us as domestic animals do, as the souls that incarnate as domestic animals. Um, they have agreements to be pretty darn close and up in our space. And some of the plants will have, more the intention and agreement to be in deeper connection with other things besides humans, whether that's just the land, whether that's the nature beings themselves, whatever that might be, if it's just being there to support the ecosystem in general, um, they could just come in with really different agreements. So I do sometimes notice that there's a difference. As you teach, there's a difference in the approach, in the way that we approach them to have like a healthy, respectful conversation. But there is a difference in how the conversations can go sometimes. I think that sometimes I need to be more targeted with my questions because they're kind of like easier to disconnect. Whereas if I talk to a domestic animal, there's a really good chance they're going to try to talk my ear off. and they're just going to be like, oh, thank God you people finally can hear me. You'll finally understand me. And I've wanted to say this for so long. Whether that's about, something they want, or if they're just like, mom needs to hear this. Um, and again, that could be like big life lessons, or that could be like, she needs to drink more water. I've been trying to tell her to drink more water. That could be absolutely anything, but they're usually really excited to talk. And I find that a little bit more with houseplants than with wild plants. But wild plants and wild animals, they have their own agenda too. And it's sort of like there's much more of needing to grease the wheels of like appropriate communication in terms of like your intro and why are you wanting to talk to me? What are your intentions in trying to talk to me and get information from me? Um, and then sometimes they're just as eager to talk because they're just like, oh, it's been a really long time since a human even tried. Like, thank goodness. How cool is this? This is amazing. Um, they're like, you can still do this. We thought you all forgot. Like, we thought you all forgot how to do this. And it's just like a homecoming feeling when you connect in with some of those plants. Um, and that can just be like the best feeling in the world because then you feel like the oneness of the environment and the oneness of everything in those connections. And that, again, like absolute best feeling in the world when they're just like, oh, thank God, there's hope for humanity because some of you haven't forgotten how to do this. Um, and like again, I just feel like that concept of bridges keeps coming up of like we're rebuilding the bridge back to where it used to be, back to where it ought to be for everyone's good, to be able to have a free flow of information and everyone's perspective kind of brought to the table. That's my favorite part. But every once in a while, you get like the wild plants who are like, I'm busy. I don't need to spend my energy on you. Like what are your intentions with taking my time today? Um, but more often than not, I feel like they do have a like happily kind of eagerly pleasantly surprised
I
attitude.
love that. Oh, I that is one of my favorite things. One of the very first trees I communicated with was like weeping. He was like,
Yeah.
I called you in, help me. And this was like literally, I was like, I don't even know if trees can talk. I don't know what I'm thinking. I go over there, I sit down, and I was like, I don't know how to do this, but we're gonna try. And this tree started talking to me, and he was like, you can hear me and feel me. And I literally felt him weeping, and I was like, I'm gonna do this too. So we both cried
Yep.
because it was like, it felt literally like that homecoming. I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense now. I get that a lot with trees. Some shrubs are really spunky. Some of them are really just like, no, I'm good. Like,
Yeah.
I'm good. We're not gonna talk here. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Wild animals too. I actually found a robin nesting in like a local park, like those little shade structures.
Mhm.
And I was like, why are you nesting here where there's a lot of people, a lot of kids? It's likely that your babies, when they fledge, like will get bothered by children or dogs or cats. It's a very popular space. And she sized me up before we even opened up the conversation. She was like, okay, you have good intentions. Your energy feels okay. Like, I'll give you a minute of my time.
Yeah.
She's like, what do you want to know? I was like, well, why are you nesting here when we live in a pretty open space? Like, there's trees everywhere. Why would you choose this location?
Mhm.
And she thought about it and she looked around, like energetically looked around. She was like, because so many people are disconnected, even in this kind of space where people are always outside. She's like, I nest here intentionally so people can reconnect and be curious and watch my babies grow. Sometimes I'm successful with them, sometimes I'm not. And she's like, and that's why I'm here is to just
Mhm.
kind of bring in curiosity with the children. And then she kicked me out. She was like, I'm brooding now, and it might not look like I'm doing anything, but I'm very busy. And then cut off immediately. I was like, oh, shoot, I totally didn't think you were busy because you're just sitting on eggs. Like, human perspective literally was completely wrong. And I got put in my place immediately. And then she cut me off. She did, however, invite me to come back. And she's like, if you want to share this with the world, that's fine.
Mhm.
Just make sure that I'm not busy. It's like, okay.
Oh, I love that. They're really so good at boundaries. I get that too. That like come back later, but now it's not a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, they've taught me a lot about boundaries too. Like, I'm good. Now's not a good
Mhm.
time. I'm busy. I'm not interested. like, okay, that's
The K
fair.
thanks bye,
Okay,
you know,
sorry.
endings that we get sometimes are just too comical and like, okay, cool. Like, I respect that.
Okay, so I'm dying to ask this question. Feral cat colonies.
Ooh, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, so kind of like making a big full circle with the super weird and esoteric. Um, okay, I'm curious if you've ever encountered this, but a lot of the feral cat colonies I've connected in with are like, well, we're actually not cats. We're ETs, like in cat bodies. We want to be in like
Hmm.
close relations to people, but definitely not on a domestic level. Like we don't want to be in their house. We want to be able to like roam the streets. And it's interesting that you mentioned growing up in New York. Some of the colonies I have connected in with are in New York. Probably a different location than you were, of course, but
Yeah, I was
um,
only there for a couple years in my early 20s, but oh my goodness, I have so many clients who deal in stray cats, and I'm just like, there's definitely something different about these cats.
aliens. I'm telling you, like the first time, okay, so one of my clients, she is a caretaker for a couple of colonies. And she's like, well, one of them is not doing very well, and this one's sick, or this one's not coming back. And so I started to connect in with them, and they're like, well, that's because we're not actually cats or here to be a cat. We're actually like ETs just checking in on the ascension of Earth. And so
Yeah.
we're just like watching people and seeing how they evolve and where they're at so we can report back. And like, so it's like this big esoteric loop of these ETs, feral cats. And I was like, okay, this is definitely one of those sessions where I'm like, I need to call in my friend. So I love that you brought in Emily Geminani, everybody. So she actually has a podcast episode. You can go back and find. I'll link it down below. Know that those two work together really closely. I too have somebody where I'm like, SOS, I'm having a really weird session with somebody. Can you like fact check me? And so she'll dive in and she'll get the exact same information without any preconceived information. It's like, okay, so alien cats are a thing. Uh,
Mhm.
well, I'm not really surprised though.
No, they just fit. They just fit. Even what I'm getting right now, it's sort of just like the neurology of cats and like the specific energy that cats hold. It's like they're a good vessel for that because they can't like hold that container, like that energy can be held in that container. But that container is sophisticated enough in the ways that it needs to be to hold that container of energy. Um, I've definitely run into that a few times with domestic cats too,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. Tell me
I've had
more.
clients who I am absolutely convinced their cats are like star beings in little cat bodies. Um, one of my absolute favorite cats to talk to, and she is the one with the relentless play drive where she'll just keep going for hours. There's no stopping her. Um, where the first time I ever connected with her, I was buzzing for like hours afterwards. And I was just like, I feel like I just talked to the essence of Starlight. And this is clearly a cat, but she is holding the essence of Starlight. And I was just like, my body was like buzzing after talking to her for like 45 minutes. Um, and that was my first like, oh, okay, I definitely just talked to a cat that's like an alien kind of, like star being origin. You're holding a very different vibe than your regular everyday average cat. Um, if there is such a thing as a regular everyday average cat, which is debatable. Um, they're just they're just very unique little beings anyway. Um, I've definitely run into that multiple times. There was even one case that I know I got hit pretty hard with some space cat energy. These two cats who had passed 10 years ago, I connected in with both of them in like a big long session. I think we were on for like 2 hours. And it took a good solid day for me to feel like a normal human again after talking to them. Um, the amount of grounding that I had to do because they were fully back. They were fully back in star mode. And the whole time that I was connecting with them, because they had so much guidance for their person, they had so many things to say that we stayed on for quite a while to give each of them a lot of time. Um, yeah, it was a masterclass of grounding afterwards after talking to them because they had been passed for so long they weren't as associated with their cat bodies. They were like fully back into star mode. So that felt like talking to something on a different planet. They were like actively, potentially working on a different planet at the moment. So even doing cases with like again, to call it basic animal communication seems kind of goofy, but cases where you're intending to go in and just have sort of a quote unquote normal conversation can really get sidetracked and end up talking to space cats.
I totally feel you. I have had some star being space cats too, just like that, where I'm like, holy shit. Like, I don't even know how to come back down from that one. Or I've had some dogs that are like, I'm actually an angel in a dog form.
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that seems to be really common. The star beings I'm getting more and more of now. Something that was really interesting now that we're kind of like talking about the afterlife space is some of the animals, like the longer that they are in spirit form, they do disconnect from their physical body in most recent life because they have souls and they're doing other things and they're evolving. And I've had some really insane conversations where one of my longtime clients, it was kind of cool. So he went from in physical, like I met him in transition at the end of life to the afterlife through the grieving process. And then he was like, okay, my mom's done grieving. Let me tell you all the really cool things that I'm actually doing. I was like, okay. And he was like, okay, so I'm incarnating into different realms, like different planets, to experience like this kind of concept of love. And then I'm going to bring it back into a physical body, into Earth. And so he was like showing me all of these really tall ET type. I think they're Arcturians. I don't know. It's been a while, but he was like showing me all these really cool blue beings. And he's like, yeah, this is where I'm going. And then I'm going to be going over here and doing this, this, and this. And so showing me all of these different realms, and they definitely felt star being related. So he's incarnating in all these different places to like bring their energy and essence into his soul frequency. And then eventually he's going to come back into a physical body on earth and anchor in their energy. And I was like, I'm sorry, what now? Like, I'm only, this is too much. Like, that happened about a year in once I started. And I was like, this is mind blowing. And then I've
Mhm.
had other animals share with me how they take light codes and they're experimenting on creating new kinds of flowers. And I'm just like dying to know more about this. We're like, yeah, we're into the lab right now. We're playing with light codes and we're trying to create new kinds of flowers to anchor into New Earth once like the frequencies shift. I'm like, we're gonna have new flowers? Tell me more. And one of them showed me like with goggles on, for example, in a lab, and then the flower concoction they were trying to create blew up on them, and they're like, yeah, that one didn't work. I literally was like, this has to be real. I'm not that creative.
It's incredible. That's a new one for me. Oh my goodness, I need to go, yeah, inquire some more about some of those things.
Yeah, I'll have to see
I
because
love
that one was
that.
a deep dive soul transcript style. So I actually have like the language. I'll have to see
Cool.
if I can find it and share it, maybe in a blog or on an Instagram post or something because it was pretty wild.
That's amazing. I love that. That makes so much sense to me. One thing that I get pretty often, so I don't know if this is kind of my lens and this feels like what I'm open and available for. This is also why I love animal communication so much. I don't think I would be so open to all of these things if animals hadn't brought it through in sessions. They've like titrated all of this information in for me, like slowly over time. It started with a lot of connections with guides that they would bring in. And like you said, you know, angels, some of them being spirit guides who chose to come into a body for a moment, but then they pass and they hop back up onto your spirit guide team. Um, any of those kinds of things. And then they started going, they were like, okay, you can handle this now. Like you can get the real information now. um, that is absolutely amazing. I get a lot of like other dimensional kinds of reincarnations from them, even like being other types of beings on other planets. Sometimes it feels really clear when you're talking to like Arcturian or Palladian or whatever the heck, where they kind of come in a different form. But it's like even in those spheres, there's different species, there's different iterations of beings in those types of environments. And a lot of the times my perception is that sometimes they're incarnating as like other types of beings that, you know, I have absolutely no prior context for or awareness of that they'll tell me that they're learning through this type of being this time.
I get
Yeah.
that too. They're like, yeah, I'm gonna go do this now. I'm like, my brain can't actually accept that right now. I really love that we did have a similar path of needing the animals and
Mhm.
proof of our connection and really developing our trust in what we were receiving to be able to open up to the uh, extra esoteric soul level kind of
Yeah.
information. And I think that that's something that I cannot stress enough is like you have to have really good discernment in this space. And I think that the animals are one of the best ways to kind of fine tune your discernment and build trust with yourself and your abilities. And then it's like, and they know when you're ready for the next step. They're like, okay, she's ready. Let's like blow her mind again and again and again. And it's like, as soon as you get to grip with one concept, they're like, all right, and then the next and the next. And so it's very easy for those who are open to these kinds of connections, like outside of the physical uh evidential kind of information. It's like once you open up into so much more, it's like holy schmoly, there is so much more. And I wish going back to like animals specifically, that more animal communicators would talk more openly about this because like you said, and like I truly believe is like we are all very intimately intertwined with nature, the unseen realms, those above and below. And it's like the animals are one gateway into it, and so being open to those concepts and principles is like it just is a natural flow of combining all into one and really getting a bigger picture of what could be.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly agree more. And they're just the best guides into that work because they really do hold, especially like the domestic animals, they're used to working with us. They kind of get what we're dealing with. A lot of the times in sessions, animals will be like, "Oh, you guys have to deal with so much human life stuff." I'm like, "Thank goodness you have me so that you have an avenue out of all that like human life stuff that you have to deal with and think about." And even in this way, there's such a good gateway and like pathway to the wider world as they see it, as we can now thankfully see it in just an expanded state. It's like it's still our world. It's still like I think that is a really important piece for me too, as people open up as well, even like going through animals, is that we stay grounded while we do it and we stay like grounded in, we're just expanding our awareness. We're still here. Like we still have work to do here. We still like came to be here rather than to just like play in all of the realms of what else is out there and just like stay up there. I'm like, yes, and let's bring it back, and let's bring it back, and let's
I
make it
love
back.
that. We have
Yeah,
to bring it back down. We
or
have to
else
bring
what's
it
the
back
point?
down.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's an
Yeah,
imagination exercise unless we anchor it back in to our expression and how we change how we move through the world and interact with the world and bring those frequencies that we're being gifted with from them back into wherever we get to go, wherever like the human areas that they don't want to be in a lot of the time. I'm thinking about like having connections with, let's just say, some unicorn beings and some fairy beings, and sometimes they'll leave a certain frequency with you, and then I get to go take that into the grocery store. They're not going into the grocery store with me. Like the fairies are more often than not going into like busy human trafficky areas and doing a whole heck of a lot of work in spaces. Like there were certain spaces, I mean, I'm thinking about around airports, there are beings, they're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere. But in certain cases, they don't always want to kind of go in and like do the work, quote unquote, in some of those busy spaces. But they left me with something that I can go in and do that. Like I can carry that with me and I can kind of bring that specific flavor, bring that frequency that they sort of gifted me with, like into other spaces for them and like into other interactions with humans for them. And there's just certain things that we can do that they can't really do as easily. So we're kind of working in partnership. And that's one of the things that feels the best is when we get to work as partners, not putting them above us, not putting us above them, just equal partnership. And like, how do we bring that into the world to benefit more people
exactly.
and the land
100%.
and all the things to benefit everything, not just people, but people are the ones who need to catch up. So we're playing the catch up game.
Yeah, I really love that. I too feel like that equal partnership with those, whether they are physical and or unseen, depending on just like what layer you're working with. What I always get encouraged to do is to like share their energy and their messages and bring it into the physical because, like you said, it's like it's anchoring it into the physical, or else it's not really. worth it. We're here to change the world, no big feat, no big deal. We'll just,
Yeah.
share their energy through us. And that to me is like one of our jobs here.
hmm I know it takes something from being like a beautiful dream that only you got to experience to an actual gift to others that you get to interact with and an actual contribution. Um, and which is just such a different thing. Like you having a beautiful dream, that's amazing. Sometimes those messages are just for you, but also if we can integrate them, then they get to be a contribution for everybody as
Yep.
well. Like the more that we get to do that and like reweave these connections between us and all of these other beings that are actually here and kind of like ready and waiting oftentimes to um yeah, to kind of just acknowledge more of the wholeness that we're all in all the time. Like going into a forest and just acknowledging that you're just like one being in this big forest in a way can feel like a bit of a thought experiment, but when you let it anchor in on an energetic level as well and realize like that can come in and benefit me and I can carry that with me. And that gets to be a contribution that I get to offer wherever I go. It's a very different experience.
Oh, I love that. I can totally feel the forest vibes creeping in already. It's like, hey guys, they're like, you're talking about us.
Mhm. I've
Oh
had some
my
trees kind
goodness.
of knocking on the door during this conversation too.
I know my room is full, and so is yours. I'm like,
Mhm.
y'all, we don't have like 3 weeks to get through
No.
this. I mean, we could do this all day. And
Mhm.
you just read energy so similarly to me and have such aligned values. It's so much fun to talk with you. Like I said, we could stay here all day and chat. However, I'm afraid our time is coming to an end, and I'm really sad about that. So maybe I'll have to invite you back and we can just keep going with the conversation. But for the listeners, where can they find you and what offerings do you currently have?
Yeah, currently, I am on Instagram at sunlight.intuitive. And you can find my booking link in that bio there, just a simple Calendly link. So I have a pretty low tech operation right now, and you'll just notice animal communication sessions listed in that Calendly link in terms of how to work with me. I am one of those people who leans towards spending more of the time actually doing the work and it's kind of like pulling teeth sometimes to get me to just like be online and like show up on social media, but that is the easiest way to find me, even though it's a pretty tiny little page right now. If you're interested in some of these other things, just shoot me a message, honestly, in through the Instagram page. If you're like, hey, I'd actually rather talk to some plants, absolutely. If you're like, hey, I'd rather talk to some of my guides and get some clarity around that kind of thing, or have any other kinds of questions about other things that we've talked about today, feel free to just send me a message and we can see what makes the most sense to do. But right now you'll notice that it's just animal communication on that page for the time being. But more to come in the future. There's a lot that just goes on behind the scenes.
Yep. And that's how it goes. So, animal slash open to whatever is interested, I will have all of her links and contact information in the show notes so you can very easily find her. Any final thoughts, my friend?
I think that, oh, how do I wrap up a conversation like this? I feel like we could go in just a million different directions. Like how to put a cap on something this big. I'm just really grateful for the animals for opening, like being such a safe introduction to this space. Like I think they will always be my first love, no matter how many other avenues I dive into, guides, ETs, plants, all the things. Um, so I really do encourage people to kind of like let the animals be a guide initially, even if other things are calling your attention. Like there's time for all of it. There's time for all of it. But um, really appreciate the animals for being such safe and clear and loving guides to the rest of this broader world that we get to play in now.
I love that. I second that. The animals are one of the best places to start. They're
Yeah.
just so, oh, they're just pure light.
Diving into any of the rest, like you said, does require like so much self-trust and
Hmm.
discernment and just basic foundations. And the animals are the absolute best ones to teach us the basic foundations.
Yep.
They're not going to let us get in over our head either.
Yeah. Oh, they'll call you out too. They're
Yeah.
like, some of my own animals are like, I'm writing down their
Mhm.
messages, and they're like, I know you think you're making this up, but you're not. I'm like, oh, okay. Thanks for the reminder.
Or yeah, I have a similar one with my dog telling a friend of mine in a practice session that we were doing. She's like, she showed us the two of us as like kindergartners, and she's like, "I'll give you more when you're ready, but right now you're kindergartners and you're learning how to walk. I'll
Oh
give
my
you more."
God, it's so
She's like a bottomless pit of cool information, but she's like, "Not until you're ready." So they really lovingly hold us through the experience. So yeah, can't recommend starting there enough.
second that. Well, thank you so much, Allie. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I could, yeah, like you said, could talk to you for hours. So
Yeah, we'll do a round two for sure.